Greetings, everyone. Here are the main points of the video. Red alert at the Caspian Sea. Ukraine delivers a 1,000-kilometer strike destroying the safe haven of Russia and Iran. The lightning strike on the night of July 25 completely tore apart the Kremlin's most secret logistics network, turning the once inviolable sea into a blazing firing range and pushing the Russia-Iran alliance into an unprecedented disaster. Washington was stunned as Russian satellites guided Iranian missiles to strike American bases. Right in the midst of stray bullets flying, Kyiv played its shocking intelligence trump card, presenting evidence that forced the U.S. government to face the bitter reality that the two wars on two hemispheres have essentially become one. Is this a direct threat to Ukraine, or are we being drawn into a third front? The declaration to destroy Ukraine's missile launchers is pushing Iran into a life-or-death situation. When the risk of a third front breaking out threatens to burn up all their already fragmented defense resources? Welcome to the Luanban Chinsu's analysis program. Before we get into the details, please take a few seconds to like the video and subscribe to the channel so we can continue. Thank you, dear audience. Ukraine rained fire on the Caspian. Russia and Iran paid a heavy price. Oil rigs and warships exploded. Ladies and gentlemen, a dangerous new front has just opened. In the Zuzaizer Basin region, where the mask of neutrality has been torn off and Kyiv's intervention has dealt a heavy blow, the strategic alliance between Moscow and Tehran has been shaken. On the night of July 25th, with a long-range raid spanning thousands of kilometers, Ukraine turned the Caspian Sea, which had long been considered the absolutely safe and closed-off backyard of the Kremlin and Iran, into a blazing firing range. This strike was aimed directly at military transport ships sailing between the two countries. It targeted the weakest point in the enemy's supply and logistics line. In the global context at this historic moment, with two wars erupting in two hemispheres, the Russia-Ukraine war and the ongoing conflict in the Middle East, these fires have officially intertwined, merging into a single catastrophe. In just a few hours, the incident shook the international agenda. The Tehran government, in a state of panic and fury, facing the risk of a third front, immediately threatened to destroy missile launch sites on Ukrainian territory. President Zelensky used a risky diplomatic move, revealing a powerful intelligence dossier to jolt Washington officials. It showed Russian military satellites were constantly conducting surveillance. In response, the president played a diplomatic trump card, revealing a powerful intelligence dossier that made officials shudder. When the curtain hiding the disrupted signals and the drilling rigs engulfed in flames was gradually lifted, the full picture finally emerged. Caspian is simply a giant inland lake, but in the balance of economic warfare, this sea is a vital bridge, a short maritime artery beyond Western control, connecting the northern ports of Iran directly to the Russian city of Achakhan. Under the guise of transporting agricultural products and legitimate container goods, the lower layer of this corridor actually carries missile components, heavy artillery shells, and military armor plates back and forth to the north. On the night of July 25th, the Security Service of Ukraine, the SBU, struck a lightning blow at 4 targets. These were key points along that corridor, sending out 4 strong, decisive messages. The 4 names that appeared on the list included the dry cargo ship Putin, the Big A ship, a Lapmonia-class fast-attack missile ship of the Russian Navy, and the Filanovsky offshore oil rig belonging to the Lukoil Corporation. By directly targeting logistics infrastructure, taking down the Lapmonia-class missile ship, they sent a warning to naval power, and by attacking the Filanovsky oil rig, they struck directly at the energy revenues that fuel the war machine. The Podolya 2 ship, which is part of the maritime transport network and is under sanctions, specializes in organizing logistics for the Russian Ministry of Defense. The Big A ship is on the sanctions blacklist of the UK and Canada. Ukrainian intelligence data recorded that this ship has made exactly 11 secret voyages to Iranian ports, repeatedly disappearing by turning off its AIS automatic identification system whenever approaching the port. Tehran claimed it was a harmless commercial ship, actually revealing it was a disguised military logistics route. Even though there are diplomatic disagreements in wording, the evidence of sanctions and the erased AIS signals have said it all in reality. The strategic bridge cutting across the sea has been shaken to its very foundation. This military breakthrough immediately caused intense psychological shockwaves in the relevant capitals, starting with Tehran. From harsh condemnations, labeling the incident as a hostile and criminal act, Tehran immediately summoned the Ukrainian chargé d'affaires to deliver a strong protest note. The peak of the escalation was a threatening statement from First Vice President al-Naqsad, asserting that Ukraine's reckless actions would have to pay the price and that any launch pad used to attack Iran would become a legitimate military target. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Azaki frequently spoke with the EU High Representative and Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov, while quickly bringing the issue to the UN Security Council. We should pause to reflect since the conflict began. Foreign Minister Abbas provided weapons to Russia, but they always hid behind the scenario that they were not a party to the conflict. The attack on the Caspian tore that veil apart. Tehran had to reveal itself as a direct participant in the war. A party to the conflict can be defeated, suffer real losses, and must simultaneously face political consequences. Tehran's anger was not only because of the loss of the ship, but mainly because they were dragged out of the shadows, to be exposed before the whole world. In theory, Iran possesses the capability to reach Ukraine through ballistic missiles, long-range UAVs, and a network of proxy forces. But in reality, Tehran's strategic chessboard is overloaded. Iran is falling into a spiral of direct confrontation, full of risks with the US and Israel. The high-level front of the European alliance is under airstrike attacks from Agiat-Siat's fighter jets. While the tense standoff with US forces in the Gulf is only temporarily easing, in a situation where a third front is simultaneously being opened against Ukraine, this means Tehran will have to divide his already limited air defense forces and missile stockpiles. Fiery statement from Foreign Minister. Please subscribe to the channel to receive new videos. Therefore, it may not be directed much toward Kiev, but is actually a message to reassure domestic public opinion in Moscow, a promise not to stand by and watch people come to the streets, and at the same time, a subtle reminder to continue to unite and negotiate together. The escalations in the spiral of confrontation with the Union are mostly symbolic retaliatory moves. From talks between foreign ministers and the EU to Russia's foreign minister, to sudden raids or actions by proxy forces, the tragedy is that once both rivals are on that ladder, Lavrov and indirect proxy moves follow. It's important to ensure a stopping point before the fire gets out of control. Tehran's fury is real, but their resources are stretched too thin on too many fronts. The skepticism about Iran's true intentions is the big question that can only be answered in the coming weeks. And Kiev's strategic calculations seem to be betting precisely on that dispersal of forces. Assuming that a Tehran, already tightly chained on both ends of the external war, will still be able to open a third front is a risky move by Ukraine. But considering the actual numbers, this assumption is closely tied to high-level discussions between the furious European representatives and the Russian leadership reaching a peak. President Zelensky has played his second strategic card, a combat intelligence dossier. President Zelensky's statement also included a double accusation since the beginning of July, causing shockwaves among Allied intelligence satellites. President Zelensky's statement alleged continuous surveillance of the military bases of the US and Gulf countries. All reconnaissance image data was then directly transferred to Iran, making Tehran's attacks extremely precise, according to Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov, who also confirmed the direct transfer to Iran, making Tehran's attacks highly accurate. From being targeted to assessing the damage after the strikes, the traces of Moscow were evident. To prove this, Kiev attached specific evidence showing that on just 2 days, July 19th and 20th, 4 strategic Allied air bases, including 2 in Bahrain, 1 in Jordan, and 1 in Qatar, were under intense reconnaissance surveillance by Russian satellites. Mr. Zelensky affirmed that he had instructed intelligence agencies to share this dossier with international partners, sending a global message that evil always seeks every corner to connect, and that Russia's aggression must be stopped immediately. These are unilateral accusations from the Ukrainian side and have not been independently verified publicly. However, the destructive power of this dossier lies precisely in its severe political pressure.
Ukraine và chưa được kiểm chứng độc lập một cách công khai. Dẫu vậy, sức mạnh hủy diệt của hồ sơ này.
Foreign Minister Abbas continued discussions with the High Representative of the alliance, looking into the essence of the issue. If Russian satellites are indeed assisting in targeting locations where American soldiers are stationed, Moscow will no longer be a neutral party. Foreign Minister Lavrov has officially become a key strategic partner in the fight against terrorism. This completely crushes all arguments in the US Congress.
Cả nữa, mà đã chính thức trở thành đối tác tình báo trực tiếp trong cuộc chiến chống lại Washington.
That the war in Ukraine is not America's war. Kyiv cleverly used Moscow's own satellites to signal Washington that the two theaters are essentially one. In the context of the U.S. administration trying to keep its distance and restrain conflict with Iran, while the cost of aid to Ukraine is always a fiercely debated topic in U.S. politics, Kyiv's accusation has completely changed the situation. Containing Russia is now no longer seen as an act of charity for Ukraine, but has become a matter of protecting the lives of American soldiers themselves.
Việc kiềm hãm Nga giờ đây không còn.
It is also about protecting the lives of American soldiers themselves. If this information is verified, the aid package for Ukraine in the upcoming congressional sessions will immediately jump from the Foreign Minister Abbas's high-level talks with the European Union and the Russian Foreign Minister, just as the strategic shift Kyiv desires. The weight of these locations appearing on the intelligence list also carries a special message. Bahrain is home to the headquarters in the heart of American naval power in the Middle East. Meanwhile, the Zhodan military facilities are also where the headquarters of the Fifth Fleet is located, the heart of American naval power in the Middle East. It serves as the backbone for all of Washington's Air Force operations in the region. These strategic coordinates appearing in Russian satellite reconnaissance notebooks sound a chilling red alert in Western capitals.
Tại các thủ đô đồng minh.
This detail also carries a profound Israeli dimension. The Gulf bases are an inseparable part of the Allied air defense architecture. The fact that Russian satellites have mapped out that defense architecture has pushed this intelligence dossier beyond Washington alone and placed it directly on the desks of every capital in the region. Kyiv's method of disseminating information is also very deliberate. Instead of posting it online to create pointless debates, they send the data directly through intelligence channels to their partners. This helps the dossier gain strategic weight on the decision-makers' desks instead of being distorted in the noise of social media. The timing of combining the attack on ships at sea and the declassification of intelligence files on the same day acts like two wings of a perfect campaign. One strikes at the physical aspect of the logistics bridge, while the other exposes its political nature. By not only letting UAVs fly over the Caspian Sea, they put the entire Russian alliance on the international chessboard with a full dossier of evidence. Looking at the picture from the Kremlin's perspective, the first thing that strikes the observer is a terrifying silence. Many hours after the relentless attacks, not a single official statement has been made. That silence is easy to understand because in this situation, any word spoken would be an unfavorable admission. The first threat is the collapse of the myth of the safe haven area. All this time, as the Black Sea became a dead zone due to Ukraine's sea drones, the Caspian Sea has been the safest refuge for the Russian Navy, as well as the launch pad for Kaliber cruise missile strikes on Ukrainian cities, from the Astrakhan and Makhachkala bases. Having lived in peace for many years thanks to being out of range, the Caspian Fleet now has to wake up to the harsh reality that this peace has ended forever. What was struck was not just a few ships, but an entire strategic belief on Russia's map. The notion of invulnerability has now been officially erased. The second threat is the exposure of the mutual dependence between Moscow and Tehran, where shipments of Shahed drones and ammunition flow north in exchange for technology and intelligence flowing south. If the satellite records are verified, it proves that Russia is willing to spy on U.S. bases as a favor to its ally, providing Western capitals with the perfect excuse to tighten sanctions even further. And finally, the appearance of the Filanovsky oil platform on the target list is a signal that Ukraine's campaign against energy infrastructure has officially extended its reach beyond its borders. Every energy asset in the Caspian Sea is now classified by insurance companies as a high-level war risk. That brutal increase in insurance premiums directly impacts the bills of every business entity operating in these waters, not just Russia. Although oil and gas output in the Caspian doesn't account for a huge share of Moscow's total exports, every explosion on these waters drives up insurance and operating costs for the entire basin to a new, more expensive level. In a wartime economy, these small additional fees, when added up, can erode finances in a truly devastating way. Now, Moscow can no longer consider the Caspian a peaceful shipping route. Every cargo ship, every anchorage, and every voyage must now be planned with the mindset of being ready for attack. It requires warship escorts, strict signal secrecy discipline, and joint protection protocols with Iran. All of that means wasting time, consuming fuel, and exhausting the fleet's capacity, officially ending this corridor's greatest advantage, its cheapness and convenience. Even ships that have never been hit have to set sail with higher shipping costs, putting more pressure on President Putin's strategy. On the main fronts, the pace of fighting shows no signs of cooling down as oil refineries and warehouses deep inside Russia continue to burn. And now the most discreet supply route and the Kremlin's closest partnership have been brutally exposed to the public overnight. The remaining options for Moscow are extremely limited and all come at a high price. Redeploying air defense systems to protect the Caspian Sea would create deadly gaps on other fronts. Shifting goods to air or land corridors would be both slow and expensive. And if they choose to stand by and do nothing, it's no different than inviting the next Ukrainian attack. The most expensive bill of this partnership is weighing heavily on Moscow. A Kremlin that hasn't even finished its own war now has to send satellites, warships, and national prestige to patch up its allies' war. Each new front that opens up further depletes Russia's already exhausted resources, and every bit of that loss directly strips them of power at the negotiating table. The next strategic signals to watch have been established. The next explosion on the Caspian Sea, Iran's first concrete move toward Ukraine, the reception of satellite files in allied capitals, and the new insurance rates just set for this sea. And there's one more sign, perhaps the most discreet but also the most honest, the Zadar screen. If the sanctioned ships on the Caspian Sea completely turn off their navigation signals, switch to running at night, and stay tucked away in safe ports, that will be undeniable proof that Ukraine's campaign has been effective, and that the strategic bridge between Russia and Iran is now operating in fear. So, in your opinion, is Russia backing Iran? And is Ukraine's bold strike on the Caspian Sea enough to collapse the supply line?